Hello TV fans, I am bored now, back with you on this video. I'm going to be talking about the recent Amazon limited series called The Better Sister. So it comes from a novel by Annifer Burke. It stars Elizabeth Banks and Jennifer Beals. Jennifer Beals' husband is killed randomly one night. She comes home to find him dead, and at first the suspicion falls on their son, who they have raised together. He becomes the main suspect because of some DNA evidence at the scene. Exchange sister, played by Elizabeth Banks, she is actually the mother of Ethan, of the son, and a long time ago they had an arrangement because Elizabeth Banks' character had problems with addiction, and the Jennifer Beals character Chloe, who has done quite well for herself, she's become quite rich, they agreed to look after the son Ethan because the Elizabeth Banks character Nikki couldn't, supposedly anyway. There's things that are revealed about what actually went down in the past later on. So it's partly about who killed the husband, Adam his name is, and it's partly about what went on in the past with the family, with the husband, and with some of the shady business dealings of the law firm that Adam worked for. One of the other big characters, played by Kim Dickens of Deadwood fame, she is this sort of hard-boiled detective who's on the case. She's got a partner, but she is by far the more aggressive one, the one who's very much believing that one of the sisters was involved, or at the very least she believes that they're trying to cover up something for Ethan. So she's aggressively pursuing them a bit more than her partner, who's, I get the impression, is a bit more inexperienced, quite different in their approach, but they have quite a fun little dynamic going on. So just to sum up my thoughts on the series as a whole, and like if you should watch it, this one didn't really hit for me. Like, I thought it was very dull at times for a lot of it. It took a very long time to really get to anything that meaty or interesting. Because the thing with Amazon and these limited series, these kind of, I guess in a way I would put it in the mould of something like Big Little Lies, that kind of quite a glossy sort of like thriller with a bit of a soapy feel, but a little bit of like a satirical bite to it as well. I think it's sort of cornered the market for that kind of show a little bit. But the problem with that is, for a show like that to work, it needs to do one or two things. One is it has to have a satisfying plot that is really well put together and engages you and just all connects quite satisfyingly. And this really doesn't. As I said, it was very plodding. Overall, I don't think they made the most of the mystery elements of it. So it wasn't really that exciting or that interesting to watch. I didn't really find the characters that interesting or engrossing. If that stuff isn't like amazing, the other direction you could go is that you could make it quite sort of hammy and a little bit more entertaining, so that like dialogue stands out, characters stands out, and you don't really have that in this. There's definitely the odd moment, you know, like it's got Matthew Modine, who plays the head of the firm and of Adam's like law firm, and you can tell he's got a vested interest throughout. And there's a theme running through this which becomes more clear as the show goes on, about it's almost like a post-Me Too type drama, and this idea of men trying to control women and trying to control like the narrative, women's angle of things as well. Like, you've got this character who works with Chloe, who is always trying to push her to put a book out there, to like share her experiences in a book. And when she gets to know the the Elizabeth Banks character a bit more, and she comes more into it. She's trying to get her to do the same. Mystery doesn't really come into focus that much until the end of the well, not the very end, but the last 2 or 3 episodes. We take a long time to get to the court case, like the trial, because as I said, the son is the number 1 suspect for a long time, and he's put on trial. It does take a long time to get to the trial, and then the trial really doesn't last very long, and it's not very interesting to watch. You would have thought they would have made a bigger deal of the trial. It would have been a bigger part of things. And then when you get to this is full spoilers now, so if you haven't seen the series, then this is probably a good time to turn off the video. But in any case, when you get to the trial, and the lawyer eventually is able to create reasonable doubt, which gets Ethan off, focused in the last 2 episodes, and we go back and actually see what happened with Adam. You get a bunch of red herrings, which I didn't find that satisfying, like the doorman, for example, at like the building where Chloe lives, and how he becomes quite involved in her life. We see how he didn't like the way the husband treated Chloe, so there was this whole thing where he was like threatening the husband. The best thing about the series is the cast. Like Jennifer Beals is very good. Like, she's very strong in that role, a very like commanding lead as always. And yeah, she's always very watchable. I will say, as sisters, they are well cast, like her and Elizabeth Banks. They bounce off each other very nicely, had good chemistry. So it seems like they enjoyed acting off each other and starring together. Like, sometimes that really comes across, and I think that does in this.
He says, "Hey, Nikki, I got here as soon as I could." This is everywhere. At least it's a good photo of us. Sick burn, 1998.
Elizabeth Banks, you always think more as a comedic actor, and that's a little bit of an issue in this, because there's definitely some over-the-top cartoony type reactions from her, and just certain scenes when she's reacting to certain things. And the idea is that there's sometimes when she's on drugs or she's been drinking, meant to be like a little bit out of it and hyper, and her desperation to like stay in the life of her family, of her son. But sometimes it does feel a bit like it's the Elizabeth Banks comedic performance. So that takes you out of it a little bit. But overall, I think it's actually a pretty solid performance from her. And like I said, they do have good chemistry together. There's some good character actors throughout the cast. Like I said, Matthew Modine is always very good as like a villain. It's a shame we didn't really get more of him. You get randomly John Finn, who people will know from Cold Case, and as Pacey's father from Dawson's Creek, he shows up in this. Yes, yeah, he just plays like the grizzled police chief, who's a little bit old-fashioned, and you can see he is starting to get really old now, but he's still chipping away with these like supporting roles. And one of his little quirks is that he's got a problem with this young Asian guy and his hair being a bit sort of flashy and fancy, and he apologizes to him later on, but that's just one of his little quirks. Kim Dickens, I think, apart from the 2 sisters, like her character was another sort of standout. Like, I thought she was very, again, entertaining to watch and engrossing, and yeah, you were sort of interested in watching her character. And I quite like what she had going on with her partner as well, like how they were sort of chalk and cheese. As I said, she was the more savage, sort of ruthless detective. He was a little bit more mild and like laid back. So, but there's some fun little banter between them. Like you get some of the better sort of like comedy or lighter moments between them. It never really does enough to make you like the main characters and to sort of root for them. Like I think it's a bit of an uphill task making us care about like rich people to begin with, and about like their plight, and just feeling sorry for them in this kind of thing. Like, you can definitely see some of the themes that they're going for really do enough to, like, apart from the performances being good, like, really make you care about these characters. And they sort of like shoehorn in a bunch of like, oh, okay, she was abused by her husband and such other things. You know, she's been harangued on social media. She was harangued by the FBI. At times, I actively like disliked the Elizabeth Banks character. I thought she was really kind of obnoxious. She wasn't really an addict. There's this weird thing where it appears as though she might have became an addict later on because of what she was going through and being shut out of her son's life. But yeah, originally she wasn't, and there's this whole thing about, it's revealed later on about how Adam lied to Chloe, like Soapy sort of elements, because of the fact that he starts seeing the sister anyway, having originally had the son with like the Elizabeth Banks character. But the whole idea is that he lied about that side of it, about her being an addict, and just basically used his money and power to like shut her away. These kind of like lackluster subplots, like I said, the stuff with the feds and like their involvement, and at times it's a bit confusing what's exactly going on with certain storylines. You get this sort of like cheap affair with the Chloe character and like one of Adam's business associates, and again it just feels like it's done for drama. There's not really a lot to it. I guess they have decent enough chemistry, and you do get to see how Jessica Biel still has it physically, which she absolutely does. But yeah, you just get these subplots that feel a bit slapped on, and Miranda about, again, maybe because it comes from a novel, you could sort of like expand on these, or they might feel a bit more satisfying and fleshed out in the novel. You know, maybe the character writing is better in the novel, because I didn't really feel the character writing here. And there's a lot of cliches, especially when you get to the latter half of the series. Nikki, the Elizabeth Banks character, you get her meeting this guy at an AA meeting, and there's this whole thing which you've seen a million times where it's like, at first they're at odds with each other, but that just sets up then there's going to be a thing when they connect with each other, and then there's going to be a relationship. And he just looked like this very sort of uninteresting, like Hawaii Five-O sort of extra, like hippie type character. He was like a bit of a blank slate, and it was so forced, and he was even like connected to her character, and they didn't really do anything with his character. Again, maybe in the novel they do a bit more, but yeah, you just get this like him showing up to the trial. They get Ethan off because of reasonable doubt. No, Jake, sorry, who's been having an affair with Chloe, and they bring up the whole abuse things, like his affair with Chloe as part of like the way to create reasonable doubt. The Kim Dickens character pursues them, and then there's the whole thing at like an AA meeting where she takes it, but to try and use the DNA because she's starting to suspect the Elizabeth Banks character. And then the Elizabeth Banks character trails her and digs into her past, and yeah, you just don't really care that much. Like, you just don't, you're actually rooting for the Kim Dickens character to like get the Elizabeth Banks character. So it's, and in the end it's a little bit convoluted the way they, because the big reveal is that it is Nikki to the house that day, and she, in self-defense, she killed Adam because she wanted to take Ethan away, and things got aggressive and he was choking her, and she stabbed him in self-defense. And then it was Ethan. He probably knew it was one of them, and he basically contaminated the crime scene, and that's how he got originally blamed for it and put on trial. But yeah, I don't know, to me they never really made Nikki that likeable to be like, okay, they're doing it, they're turning the tables on this detective, and she ultimately gets thrown off the case. And they tie the whole thing together in the end. Kapil's character like turns the tables and actually frames the Matthew Modine character, because again he would have motive because of some of the dodgy stuff that had been going on. But in any case, they do that whole thing where it all kind of ties together, where they're able to get out of it, and it's this idea of, well, okay, he may not have been guilty of that, but they were up to a lot of dodgy stuff, and ultimately they are the bad guys in all this. So it's that kind of very clean cut morality type thing, but that's another thing which I didn't really find that interesting or satisfying, because you start to get all this talk of like big business, dodgy deals, like illegal corporations, spreadsheets, all this stuff that for some reason they always think is like really interesting in this kind of show, and it's a real job to make it that interesting. Like I just don't think it's very thrilling to watch these things or hear people talk about these things in like dim lighted rooms. It just doesn't, very rarely does it fly off the page and actually lead to good drama. Because another thing this show reminded me of was Ozark, and I think Ozark is an example of this kind of thriller done like really well, where you don't want to look away, and you're so engrossed in the characters and this whole high flying and kind of getting deeper and deeper into the mire, and how are they going to get out of this one. And some of like the shady business deals reminded me a bit of Ozark as well, and that was just so much more thrilling and compelling to watch. I enjoyed the lawyer character. She was one of the other brightest spots, because I think she was really solid and grounded, and she wasn't afraid to fight. But the problem with lawyers in a lot of shows like this, because this lawyer was actually a little bit more likable in a way, because I think with lawyers they're either like overly aggressive or overly cartoonish, or they're just like completely unlikable in many ways. It's like, I'm going to do anything to get my clients off. But this one was more straight down the middle.
It's an infringement on your constitutional rights. It's outrageous, egregious, preposterous. It's definitely preposterous.
It did take a while for her to come up with a good strategy, but she was very smart and very savvy when it came to telling her clients not to do stupid things and not to get in trouble further. At one point, Chloe is talking to the other detective, like the younger guy, and it's like, yeah, that's really dumb. Why are you doing this? Like, that's just basic one-on-one. And she tells them not to do that. But yeah, she's a good in-between lawyer, I think. There's also this thing with like the lawyer character and also the Chloe character in this, which I've noticed that where they do a lot of pointing, like to confirm their dominance. They point a lot at people, and in dominant situations they like dismiss them as you're not gonna fuck with me. Getting some decent buzz, and it's done quite well for Amazon, and it's a shame because of the cast. And I can see how, yeah, either it could be like a meaty murder mystery type show, or it could at least be quite an entertaining satire where there's some meaty things going on. But overall, the characters were just too dull, and there wasn't really that much style to it, or that much that's going to draw you in for me. It was just very plodding, and I think because of the performances I could like watch it, but ultimately it wasn't very engrossing. And I thought the way they handled the mystery elements of it and some of the ideas were just, as I said, really sloppy. I either wanted something that was a bit more kind of over the top and entertaining and quite hammy, like you could have had some more fun than they had with the Matthew Modine character, or you needed to have, something which was more tightly to put together as a thriller. This was quite messy for me, and the cardinal sin everyone, which is boring. So, I mean, I'm not going to go low on the rating because I have seen worse, but it's definitely in the very forgettable, mediocre territory. So I'm going to go 5.5 out of 10. So that's my thoughts on The Better Sister from Amazon. Let me know what you think of the show if you've seen it in the comments below. Also, if you've read the book, then do let me know how it compares to the book. Is the book very different? Does the book fix some of the problems? But if you do have different opinions from me and you actually really like the show, then do let me know. And look out for more TV reviews, look out for movie reviews and various other stuff, live streams, all the rest of it. But like and subscribe. Support me at patreon.com/borednow for a bunch of extra perks. Also on the channel membership as well. I'll put the links in the description. But yeah, let me know what you think of this one, guys. And I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.